There's a number that should end the tariff debate, but it won't. $14 billion. That's how much American consumers lose from auto tariffs. And the supposed beneficiaries? U.S. automakers gain just $1 billion. That's a 14-to-1 loss ratio, and that's only if you don't extend the tariffs to auto parts. This is Tariffs, Global Value Chains, and the Incidence of Protection, Evidence from U.S. Automobiles. It was written by Luke Heaney, Christopher Niddle, and Jasdeep Mandia. Niddle is a professor at MIT Sloan and one of the leading economists studying energy and transportation markets. These are serious researchers doing serious structural work. Here's what they built: a full model of the U.S. automobile market. It combines demand-side analysis, how consumers actually choose between vehicles, with supply-side modeling of how manufacturers price their products and source their parts. They didn't just look at sticker prices. They dug into which models rely on imported parts, how deeply, and what happens to costs when tariffs hit those supply chains. The core finding cuts right through the political narrative. If you put tariffs on imported vehicles alone, U.S. automakers do gain about $1 billion. Demand shifts toward domestically assembled cars. American producers pick up market share. So far, so good for the tariff boosters. But consumers lose $14 billion. That's not a rounding error. That's a 14-to-1 transfer from American families to American automakers. Every dollar of protection costs consumers 14 times that amount in higher prices and lost choice. Now here's where it gets really damaging for the conventional tariff argument. What happens when you extend tariffs to imported parts? The components, the steel, the electronics that go into those American cars. The math collapses entirely. Consumer losses roughly double. And U.S. automakers, the supposed winners, lose about $2.6 billion. Because the dirty secret of the American auto industry is that it depends heavily on global supply chains. Ford, GM, Stellantis, they all buy parts from Mexico, Canada, Germany, Japan. Tariff those parts, and you're taxing the very companies you claim to be protecting. The heterogeneity matters here too. Not all U.S. automakers are equal. Firms with greater exposure to imported parts get hammered. Firms with more domestic supply chains can actually benefit. The industry doesn't move as one block. And policy that treats it that way will create winners and losers within the sector, not just between domestic and foreign. This paper is coming out at a moment when the U.S. just announced sweeping auto tariffs, 25% on imported vehicles, with parts tariffs potentially following. The policy debate has been dominated by simple narratives. Protect American workers. Bring manufacturing home. Make cars here again. Heaney, Niddle, and Mandia are showing us the math behind those slogans. And the math is not flattering. The counter-argument you'll hear is that the long run matters, that tariffs force reshoring, that over time supply chains adjust, and the consumer pain is a temporary transition cost. That's a real argument. This paper doesn't fully address the dynamic effects. It's a static counterfactual, a snapshot of what happens under current supply chains, not what happens in 10 years if factories move. So there's genuine uncertainty about the long game. But here's what's not uncertain. In the near term, the people who will feel this most are the people buying cars. Average Americans, not the boardrooms of Detroit. And based on this research, even Detroit loses if parts get tariffed. What did they get right? Almost everything. The structural approach is rigorous. Using exchange rate variation to identify cost pass-through is smart and defensible. The model-level data on imported parts exposure is novel and important. Most tariff analyses treat firms as black boxes. This one opens the hood. What did they miss? The political economy. There's no model here for how tariff revenue gets used, or whether that $14 billion in consumer losses generates offsetting fiscal benefits. And the dynamic effects, reshoring, new investment, supply chain adjustment, are genuinely outside the scope. That's not a criticism. That's just scope. But the core insight stands. Where you assemble a car is not the same as where you make a car. A vehicle assembled in America can have most of its value created overseas. Tariff policy that ignores global value chains isn't protecting American industry. It's taxing it from the inside while handing the bill to consumers. Big thanks to Luke Heaney, Christopher Niddle, and Jasdeep Mandia for doing the structural work that most policy debates skip entirely. This is Rockport.